Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new WE Harpen, designed by Michael Birch. This is available in a few different configurations. I will link it right down below in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. And thank you so much to WE for sending this in for me to take a look at and share with everybody. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Overall length is coming in at 7 inches. Blade length is 3 inches to the middle of the frame, and the cutting edge is about, I'm gonna say that's 2.8. How about some size comparisons up against, gotta say what I usually say. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the 80-20.5 and the 80-10, much closer to the size of the 80-20.5. I will point out it has almost exactly the same amount of cutting edge despite being a shorter knife overall. Let's go ahead and put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3, wherever that is. There it is. Definitely closer to the size of the Spyderco Para 3. Did I say PM2 and PM2? This is a PM2, this is a Para 3. Cutting edge, actually longer than the Para 3, despite being a shorter knife overall. And finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. Alrighty, how's the action on this knife? It's actually pretty good. There's plenty of access to that lock bar there. It actually does hang over just a little bit, making it very easy to disengage, have the flipper tab fall to your finger, and has this is the action that I prefer. Fall shut action is cool, but in practice, when it comes to a knife that I just trust daily without having to, I don't like to dedicate any more of the few brain cells I have left to whether or not the knife is going to cut me while I'm doing something as mundane as just deploying it to use it, right? It flips, you disengage it, it falls to the thumb, and you can turn and close it with relative ease. This will get smoother over time, but I don't think it'll ever be a guillotine, and I kind of like that. Ever since I've handled a lot of Brian Nadeau's production and custom stuff, I've just come to prefer that exact type of action, so it's nice when I can get it, or as close as possible, in a production knife like this. So the action's very good. There's only one way to deploy it. It's the flipper tab, and you can light switch it if you want. You can get up on this angle right here and even push button, and it works pretty well. Honestly, the detent is good. I would call this probably about medium to medium heavy, somewhere in there. Definitely leaning on the heavier end of medium and not the lighter end, if that makes any sense. But obviously the blade size and weight and the leverage you get off the flipper tab will kind of alter how that feels. Anyways, I think that the action is good. Let's do carry profile up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually slightly slimmer, which is cool. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here, lengthwise, it's nowhere near as long as either. Well, it's close to the same overall length as the Para 3. Not quite, though. Nowhere near the same length as the PM2. Height-wise, it's taller than we normally see for a knife of this size, but still not quite the same height as the Para 3. Truthfully, in and out of the pocket, this didn't feel like a large or cumbersome object. It was easy for me to carry. There's enough knife there that you're not going to like wash your pants with the knife still in it, right? It's not like a mini bug out or something like that. But it's not big enough to really cause a problem. I really did not have an issue carrying this knife or pulling it out or deploying it. Let's go ahead and weigh it. So for materials, what do we have here? We have titanium with a titanium backspacer and titanium pocket clip and a hand rub satin finish, that's true. It's actually hand rub satin finished. CPM 20 CV blade. I'm sure it says somewhere. I looked up to make sure on the website, but I believe on the box, yeah, it lists right here, CPM 20 CV. On the satin ones, by the way, the non-coated ones, your Rockwell hardness is going to be 59 to 61, which is roughly the industry standard. I, along with many other people, wish that was a little higher, but it is what it is, and it's relatively acceptable. So that's what you're looking at for the Rockwell hardness. Your coated versions of this blade will drop 1 point for the whole range. So instead of 59 to 61, your coated versions will be 58 to 60, which is not great. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to order one of the coated ones. Weight. I'm going to guess this weighs somewhere about 3.5, 3.75 ounces. Close. Almost exactly 3.5. I actually got one. Good deal. 3.5 ounces. So decent ratios. And this has a fairly tall blade. So balance point actually right there where you put your index finger. Yeah, not bad. Just all the way around, not a difficult object to carry. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. We've got a T8. Imagine that. WE's pretty good about this. T8. Still have avocado on my thumbs. You can tell which reviews were recorded in the same day. If you're like, I remember him saying something about avocado on his fingers like 3 days ago. It means that these reviews were both recorded in the same day. Oh boy. If you don't know how I do this, right? I have a rotation of knives that are being carried for review. And sometimes I'll carry 2 knives in one day, 3 knives in one day, as long as each knife, right, that's relatively simply put together, right? A knife like this is not an ultra complicated build. It's something I've experienced before from a company I'm well familiar with, right? So it really only takes a combined 2-day carry experience for me to put enough together to review it on this channel, right? This is a design review channel, so I don't need to put nearly as much into it as somebody like Gideon's Tactical, who takes their knives out and beats them into trees and stuff like that, which is fine, right, for people looking for that. But I do that with groups of knives, and then every day, Monday through Friday, I record 2 to 4 uploads back to back based on the information I've gathered with said knives. Now, some people think this is enough. Some people don't really like it. Whatever. This is how I've been doing it. But the point is, the reason that I'm telling you this is that's why you notice, because everything's pre-recorded, right? And the scheduling is different. They're not necessarily scheduled in the exact order that they're reviewed. So 3 days prior or 3 days later from this review, you might notice that I have avocado in the same place on my thumbnail. And this is the reason why. Thanks for telling us. We were definitely wondering that. Okay, moving on here. We, we have the pivot is a T8. The lock bar insert screw is a T8. The pocket clip screws are T8. Everything is T8. And we have 2 screws on each side for the frame, which is, say it with me, minimal hardware. Good to go there. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's measure blade stock thickness and get into it here. Get into the meat and potatoes, that is. My favorite part of every meal. He eats meat and potatoes for every meal? Not really. That's just like, shut up. The 121 thousandths is what we're looking at here. So, little on the thinner side, if we consider 130 thousandths to be the median of the knife world, which I do. Anyways, moving on here. This has kind of the, I don't know, I know that Nick Chuprin's not the first one to do it, but whenever I see this notch in the blade, that's who I think of as Nick Chuprin. But it kind of reminds me of that. This actually has some personality here with the milling, and we have kind of this heavy-duty screen door kind of look right here, which some people are going to like and some people aren't. And that's actually, you know, taking place of the internal milling that we normally see. And it's kind of neat that you can see through the knife without there being the turbo holes or the tactical holes or whatever you call them. But it's kind of neat. It's just an aesthetic thing that gives the knife some personality without taking away from its utility, right? Ergonomically, this is a knife that is 3 fingers solid, and then we have a little bit of a ramp here where the pinky slides off the end. It's not uncomfortable. It's not enough of a ramp. You know, I don't like designs where I can't get a full grip. And that's a personal thing. You don't have to agree with me. But on knives where there's enough room, I don't like a huge ramp off the end because it feels like my pinky just doesn't know where to go, right? It's like the kid trying to crawl up the wet slide backwards and just keeps going back down. That's my kid. And I'm like, you're not supposed to go that way. You have to go up the ladder and go down, right? It's just, that's what it feels like. My pinky is sliding back off the edge. But for the positioning of my fingers, this isn't an aggressive ramp, and it honestly feels pretty good. That little notch, if it's meant to be a spot where you put your thumb, right, to brace, it's not bad. I feel like I prefer this position back here, but the funny thing is the jimping on the spine isn't deep enough to be meaningful. This is what I call less George jimping, and by that I mean, I'm referring to the VECP, the mid-tech. It's basically useless. This jimping doesn't do anything. I wish that we had more of, you know, something like this on the back of the knife. It's just better. Like if you're going to put jimping there, like just make it useful. But truthfully, overall, my experience, my ergonomic experience is pretty good. I mean, it's not amazing. I'd give it a B plus probably. I'm not super upset about it. It's a small knife that I wouldn't expect to get a full grip or a completely comfortable grip on, but it's surprisingly not bad. The pocket clip doesn't quite make it to the 50% length of the handle, which is a little thing that I, generally speaking for me, it's not perfectly consistent, but usually when that's the case, the pocket clip is not digging into the middle of my hand, and it's not really. It's the way that it's lined up, it's kind of right here. It's not too bad, but it's at least it's flat and not angled upward, which I like, and it's also not super sharp at the bill. The edges are nicely knocked down. They're almost radiused, which is really great because the knife is not contoured. A lot of times we get flat titanium that's just like a hard 90-degree angle, and that's never good, but this is relatively comfortable. I like it. The blade, I think, is pretty cool. Honestly, it adds just as much personality as the handle. There's not an enormous, it's not like oozing with uniqueness or personality or anything, but in a world where everything looks like the Pyrite or the Elementum, I welcome little tiny things like this, right? This is blue anodized. It kind of has this icy tumbling on it. You can get a gray one. You can get the bronze. I think there's a bronze one with a black blade. And there's, of course, the $650 to $700 Damasteel one, which everybody should be avoiding because Damasteel does not add $300 of value to the knife. WE knives! You guys have always been great and super cool about letting me speak my mind, but I'm going to keep saying this. You guys need to stop charging $300 more for Damasteel blades. Nobody else is doing that. It's just like, it's common knowledge that Damasteel adds roughly $160, $170 if you have the exact same options, but you're like, oh, but if you want the Damasteel blade, right? Every other company on earth is like, yeah, that'll be $160 to $170 more. Why? I know that they're not going to go backwards in their pricing, but I just don't understand that. If you're looking at this stuff, go for the standard stuff because you're going to be over. Unless you just love here, listen, it's your money. Buy whatever you want, right? If you just love a particular design from WE and it's your favorite designer and you can get it in Damasteel and you budgeted exactly the amount of money that they want, right? Well, then go ahead, right? But for the vast majority of people, it's simply not going to be worth it. That's just my thoughts on that. I like that we're doing this hand rub satin finish stuff. I think that looks substantially better than the almost unfinished look of a belt satin finish. That's really where I am at this point. The standard, like the basic Spyderco belt satin finish, it just looks like it hasn't been finished yet. It just looks like they're about to apply the finish and they accidentally shipped it out the door. Now, if you like the belt satin finish, that's your preference. Okay. I think this looks much nicer. And credit to WE, they do this type of thing better than the competition that's selling essentially the same knives for about $200, which we're going to come back to. Because a lot of people are quick to point out WE knives is selling CPM 20CV and titanium in very basic, execution for $50 more on average than their competition. All right. Well, to balance that out a little bit, not a lot of companies are finishing blades exactly like this. This is pretty nice, right? And take it from somebody who handles a lot of stuff. There are some companies out there that are doing this the same or better, Kunwu, but not everybody, right? Kunwu's I coughed like I was trying to hide that. No, Kunwu is doing exceptional work in the same competition zone, but WE is doing it better than most people, so just trying to give some credit there. I like the swedge, like where the flat is, which runs out to about 70% the length of the blade. We have some nice belly here. Honestly, WE and Civivi have some of the best factory edges on the market in this general zone, like this general price area. It is relatively thin behind the edge. I honestly thought it would be thicker than that. It is relatively thin behind the edge. We've got a nice tip up here. The edges out here towards the tip are relatively sharp. You can see they're shaving my fingernails, but it's pretty rare you're going to have your fingers up there. Can you choke up behind the sharpening choil? Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd keep your finger back here behind the flipper tab. I think that's probably the safest zone. The nice thing about this knife is that it tickles all of the senses correctly in terms of disengagement, in terms of deployment, the sound and feeling of the detent, right? It's all the way that it should be, which is good, and WE does a good job of that. I'm always happy to get something from WE because I know that even if it's not to my liking in terms of the aesthetics, and the pricing, I know that it will function correctly, right? And I think they're pretty good about tweaking designs from people. Like if a design doesn't work super well, they're good about tweaking it slightly. I've talked with a lot of people who've had WE like do their designs. WE does a good job of tweaking things so that they do work correctly. They do work to the preferences of the people who are actually going to be buying the product. So that's nice. And so I'm glad that WE does that. We have a little lanyard hole back here for lanyardy people. We have a very simple and basically nothing backspacer, but that's okay. We have a pocket clip that is not symmetrical, so you don't have the option for left-handed carry. Sorry, lefties, I don't know why they do this because this is very easy to manipulate with the left hand. Designers and to WE and OEMs, and come on, guys, it's not that hard. The options to get the pocket clip to fit on the left-handed side and to do it without creating an eyesore, there's a lot of different options for doing that, and we have tons of companies that have given so many examples. There's hardly any excuse for it anymore. 10% of people on this planet, roughly, are left-handed. Why? Why are we excluding them? As a right-handed person who has really never had a problem, right? We're spoiled. We're spoiled. Left-handed people are just absolutely given the shaft, man. So come on now. Let's make it a little easier on left-handed people. We have good retention on the clip, and honestly, in and out of the pocket, it's just fine. You can't, like I already said, you can't flip it over for left-handed carry, but it's fine where it is. Steel lock bar insert, doubling as the over travel stop. We have a stop pin located in its traditional position. No shouldering, but it doesn't need it. Runs on bearings, by the way. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. No double clutch. No pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent in here. And a really nice clicky detent. That's what we like to see. I think this is maybe start. No, it's just my imagination. Perfectly centered. No detent lash. And WE generally does a good frame lock, so no issues there with the geometry. It's a cool knife. It's far from, anything I've never seen before. But it's cool. It's got a little bit of personality. Some people are going to, love this area. Some people are going to hate it. I think the blade is cool. I think WE does a great job with their fit and finish. And I think they're getting better all the way around in creating things that are surprising people in terms of what they think they're capable of doing. I've seen many examples from WE in 2023 where I was like, whoa, I didn't realize they could do this. This feels like more typical WE, and it's a cool design. And honestly, it's on the less expensive side for a WE, but still pretty expensive at $254. Earlier, I was saying that there's a lot of companies out there creating essentially the same thing for $200 and sometimes a little bit less, right? A lot of people like to reference the weird Amazon brands that are selling titanium and M390 for like $80. Don't buy that stuff, guys. There's a reason that it's that cheap, okay? But periodically you get somebody doing something for $150, $160 that's relatively close. More often you get companies making the same thing for about $200. You definitely are paying a premium for the WE knife, but they do things like finish work better than a lot of their competition, save for companies like Kunwu, right? So do I think it's overpriced? Slightly, not aggressively. I think a more appropriate price for this knife would have been something like $220, right? But inflation, I think even considering that, $220 or so, right? If you love this knife, then go for it, but as far as, users, collectors, enthusiasts, there's not an aggressive reason for anybody to be beating down doors for this knife. It's cool and it's good, and if you like it, I think you'll be really happy with it. But it's nothing to it's nothing that we should schedule a parade for. It's good. Good enough there. So those are my honest thoughts. I'll link it down below. You guys can check it out if you want to. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.